The video you're about to watch is just a small part of a much larger story, and we discuss that entire story on our audio podcast, the Islamic History Podcast. We cover a variety of topics ranging from the lives of the four righteous caliphs to the Bosnian War to the history of Palestine. So, if you like deep dives and in-depth storytelling about the events that have shaped the Muslim world, subscribe to the audio version of the Islamic History Podcast. And by the way, it's 100% free. Look for the link in the description box. The Latin Empire of Constantinople. Pope Innocent III was one of the most powerful pontiffs in history. He ran Europe like his own little kingdom, deposed kings at will, and wiped out heretics without a second thought. But he could not stand the fact that Jerusalem was back in the hands of the Muslims. A century earlier, the warriors of the First Crusade had torn through Anatolia and the Middle East before taking Jerusalem by force and sword. But despite these impressive conquests, the Crusaders soon began losing territory to the Muslims. First, they lost the county of Edessa to Imaduddin Zengi in 1144. This led Pope Eugene III to call for a second crusade. Thousands of Europeans responded to the Second Crusade, but most of them never set foot in Edessa. Instead, they attacked Damascus, nearly 300 miles to the south, where they were soundly defeated. 4 decades later, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi destroyed another Crusader state, this time the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In response, Pope Gregory VIII called a third crusade to retake the Holy Land. Several powerful Christian monarchs participated in the Third Crusade. These included King Richard the Lionheart of England, King Philip II of France, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire. The Third Crusade, launched in 1189, was almost successful. Richard the Lionheart pushed Salahuddin's hold on Jerusalem to the very limits. But Salahuddin held on, and Jerusalem remained in Muslim hands. Now, 15 years after Salahuddin's death, Pope Innocent III was upset. After the failure of the Third Crusade, Christian Europe seemed to lose interest in crusading. They no longer wanted to spend their fortunes and risk their lives on a dangerous journey to fight in foreign lands hundreds of miles away. Pope Innocent III believed the Crusaders' failure in Jerusalem was God's punishment for the sins of Christian Europe. He believed God would return Jerusalem to the Christians if they repented, corrected their behavior, and supported the Church. In August 1198, Pope Innocent III issued a call for a new crusade to retake Jerusalem. He hoped to reposition Rome as the center of Europe's crusading efforts. However, this Fourth Crusade got off to a rocky start. First of all, relatively few professional warriors volunteered for the crusade. A few knights and nobles took the oath of the cross, but none of the prominent European monarchs did. Instead, thousands of poverty-stricken peasants joined, hoping to change their fortune in this new crusade. With none of the wealthy kings participating, the crusade was also short of funds. The few nobles who joined the crusade had to purchase ships on credit from the Venetians. And since the Crusaders were now in their debt, the Venetians decided to put them to good use. Enrico Dandolo, Patriarch of Grado in Italy and the de facto ruler of Venice, wanted the Crusaders to deal with one of his rivals. In return, he promised to forgive a portion of their debt. The Crusaders agreed, besieging and sacking the city of Zara on the Croatian coast. But Zara was a predominantly Catholic city, and Pope Innocent III was furious when he found out what they did. The Pope excommunicated them, though he would later forgive the French Crusaders. He did not forgive the Venetians. The Crusaders' plunder of Zara was not enough for Enrico Dandolo. He approached the Crusaders with yet another proposal. In 1195, Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelos was overthrown, blinded, and imprisoned by his brother. This revolt was supported by a group of Greek merchants who were also rivals of Enrico Dandolo. Dandolo sent the Crusaders to attack Constantinople and install Isaac's son, Alexius Angelos, to the throne. And the Crusaders did just that. By 1203, the usurper was gone and Alexius became the new emperor. But then, Emperor Alexius had trouble paying the Crusaders what he promised. The young emperor did everything in his power to find enough gold to pay them. He raised taxes, confiscated private property, and melted down priceless works of art. But it still was not enough. All his efforts did was turn the people of Constantinople against him, which wasn't difficult since many saw him as a Catholic puppet. The Crusaders stood by as Constantinople rose up against Emperor Alexius and threw him into prison. A few days later, Alexius was found dead in his cell, strangled to death. But now, the Crusaders were in a difficult spot. Emperor Alexius had been their best chance to get the money to repay the Venetians. And the new Byzantine Emperor refused to give them anything. So, the Crusaders decided to overthrow the new guy and take Constantinople for themselves. In 1204, just a few months after Alexios was killed, the Crusaders attacked Constantinople for the second time in less than a year. This time, they were thorough, brutally plundering the city for 3 straight days. Most of the warriors from the Fourth Crusade never made it to Jerusalem. Instead, they captured the Byzantine throne and established the Latin Empire of Constantinople. The Byzantine comeback. As mentioned earlier, the Byzantine Empire had been in a state of decline for centuries. This era, which included the Fourth Crusade and the Latin Empire of Constantinople, further accelerated that decline. The new Crusader-controlled, Venice-funded Latin Empire of Constantinople was in turmoil from the very beginning. They were surrounded by enemies on all sides. The Greek-speaking Byzantines who had ruled the empire for centuries fled to Nicaea in Anatolia, establishing a government in exile. Immediately, they began plotting their revenge. To the north of Constantinople was the Bulgarian Empire, which did not care for these usurpers from Western Europe. And there were several smaller Greek states, many of them former Byzantine vassals who refused to recognize the Crusaders' rule over Constantinople. In 1205, the year following Constantinople's conquest, the Bulgarians defeated the Latin Crusaders at the Battle of Adrianople. The Latin Crusaders struck back, defeating the Bulgarians in 1208 at the Battle of Philippopolis. This was just the beginning. The Latin Crusaders of Constantinople were constantly at war with their neighbors. This continuous fighting took its toll. The Latin Empire of Constantinople had very few allies. They had the Venetians, but their help always came at a steep price. The Venetians even once demanded the Latin Emperor give them his son as collateral for a loan. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire in exile was growing stronger and more confident. In 1259, they defeated an enemy alliance at the Battle of Pelagonia, gaining control over most of the territory surrounding Constantinople. They placed the city under siege until it fell 2 years later.